Keep away from that man, sweetie. A woman pulled her child along as she noticed Claire sitting with an elderly man who had a gray beard and worn jacket. Claire said nothing. She simply offered him half her sandwich, the evening sunlight bathing the three of them under the oak tree. Exactly 1 hour later, helicopter sounds shattered the peaceful atmosphere. The commanding officer stepped out, saluted and announced, "We've been searching for you for 10 years, sir. Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened." Claire Dawson, 35, taught third grade at Meadowbrook Elementary, and raised her 7-year-old daughter Sophie as a single mother in the quiet Midwestern town of Glendale. Sunday afternoons were sacred, their time to disconnect from screens and reconnect with each other. This particular Sunday found them at Riverside Park, a blanket spread beneath their favorite oak tree, a picnic basket filled with homemade sandwiches and fresh fruit between them. As Claire arranged their meal, she noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench about 30 yards away. His silver hair and beard were unkempt, his clothes weathered but clean. Most striking were his eyes, alert but somehow distant, as if seeing something far beyond the park's perimeter. Claire watched as other park-goers gave the man a wide berth. Parents steered their children away with whispered warnings. Joggers altered their routes. The man seemed to exist in his own island of isolation, amid the crowded park. "Mommy, why is that man all by himself?" Sophie asked, following her mother's gaze. Claire observed that the man had nothing but a plastic water bottle refilled from the park fountain. No food, no bag, no book, just himself and whatever thoughts kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I think," Claire replied carefully, "he might be hungry. Should we share our lunch?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically, already selecting the best sandwich to offer. As Claire approached the man, she became aware of disapproving glances from nearby families. A woman at a neighboring picnic table shook her head in obvious disapproval. Someone muttered something about encouraging them. "Excuse me, sir," Claire said gently. "My daughter and I have more food than we can eat. Would you care to join us?" The man's eyes shifted slowly to her face, assessing, perhaps wondering about her motives. After a moment, he nodded once. "We're just over there," Claire continued, gesturing toward their blanket. "Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and lemonade." The man followed her back to their picnic spot. He moved with surprising grace for someone who appeared so weathered by life. "I'm Claire, and this is Sophie," she offered as he lowered himself carefully onto the edge of their blanket. The man nodded acknowledgement, but didn't offer his name. Claire didn't press. He accepted the sandwich Sophie proudly handed him, treating it with a reverence that suggested such kindness was unfamiliar territory. He ate methodically, taking small, careful bites, his eyes occasionally scanning the park perimeter in what Claire recognized as a security check, a habit she'd seen in her cousin who'd returned from Afghanistan. From a nearby table, a woman loudly commented to her husband, "Can you believe she's letting her child near someone like that? What kind of mother?" Claire pretended not to hear, instead pouring lemonade into an extra cup. "Mommy," Sophie whispered, tugging at her sleeve, "why does he look so sad?" Claire glanced at their silent guest, noticing the slight tremor in his hands, the tension in his shoulders. "Maybe," she answered softly, "because it's been a very long time since anyone sat with him. If you believe a good person deserves to be remembered, stay here with us." When they finished eating, the man reached into his worn jacket and carefully removed a folded piece of fabric, a patch Claire realized with faded embroidery that read, "4th Marine Recon, Task Force Echo," surrounding an insignia she didn't recognize. "My father was in the Marines," Claire offered, recognizing the military connection. "He never talked much about it." The man nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing his features. His fingers traced the embroidery with practiced familiarity, as if reconnecting with a part of himself. "I was there," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Then I wasn't anymore." His cryptic statement hung between them. Claire didn't press further, sensing these were the most words he'd spoken to anyone in quite some time. Sophie, with a child's innocent directness, pointed to a scar visible at his wrist. "Did you get hurt?" "Sophie," Claire began to admonish, but the man shook his head slightly. "Long time ago," he told the child, "sometimes the outside heals faster than the inside." A man walking by with his family slowed, openly staring at their unusual gathering. He raised his phone, pretending to take a selfie with the park as background, but Claire realized he was actually photographing them. Minutes later, she glimpsed him showing his laughing. The elderly man noticed too, his posture stiffened, his eyes regaining that distant look. He began folding the patch away, preparing to retreat. "Would you like more lemonade before you go?" Claire asked, trying to ease his discomfort. As he accepted the cup, a jogger passed by wearing a Marine Corps t-shirt. He glanced at their picnic, then did a double take as he spotted the patch in the man's hands. He slowed his pace, looking back several times before continuing on his run with newfound urgency. Unknown to Claire, The jogger, Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, had recognized the distinctive Task Force Echo insignia. That same evening, he posted to a private veterans group, possible sighting of Colonel Rourke at Riverside Park. Not 100% certain, but the TF Echo patch was unmistakable. Anyone in the Glendale area, please confirm. The photo taken by the mocking bystander had already begun circulating on local social media with the caption, "When single moms adopt stray veterans, you rock bad choices." But when it reached a closed military forum, it triggered an entirely different reaction. "My God, that's him," wrote a retired general. "That's Matthew Rourke." Within minutes, the image was being analyzed by intelligence officers across multiple agencies. Phone calls were placed to the highest levels of military command. Colonel Matthew Rourke had commanded an elite reconnaissance unit during a classified operation in According to official records, he and his entire team had been killed in action. In reality, Rourke had survived a catastrophic mission failure, one that haunted him with survivor's guilt and moral injury so severe, he'd walked away from everything, unable to face the families of those lost under his command. For a decade, he had lived as a ghost, moving from town to town, refusing veterans benefits that might identify him, working odd jobs for cash when necessary. His PTSD had driven him to isolation, while debate raged in classified circles about the controversial decision he'd made in the field, a call that some labeled heroic, and others deemed a tragic error. Now, after years of searching, he had been found, not by intelligence agencies or military police, but by a third-grade teacher sharing a sandwich in a park. As Claire packed up their picnic, blissfully unaware of the ripples already spreading from their simple act of kindness, Rourke silently handed Sophie a small wooden carving of a bird he'd pulled from his pocket, perhaps the only possession he had to offer in exchange for their humanity. Type yes, if you've ever seen a hero forgotten, simply because they remained silent too long. Exactly 58 minutes after the photo began circulating through military channels, the distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors broke the park's tranquility. Families looked up in confusion as a Black Hawk helicopter approached and hovered over the open field adjacent to the picnic area. Park visitors scattered as it descended, the downdraft bending tree branches and sending napkins and paper plates tumbling across the grass. Claire instinctively pulled Sophie closer as 4 uniformed soldiers jumped from the helicopter before it fully touched down. Behind them, a 5th man in dress uniform emerged, a high-ranking officer judging by the insignia catching sunlight on his chest. "What's happening, Mommy?" Sophie asked, clutching her mother's hand. "I don't know, sweetheart," Claire answered honestly, watching as the soldiers scanned the remaining parkgoers with focused intensity, their eyes locked onto Rourke, who had risen to his feet, standing with military straightness despite his weathered appearance. The officer approached him directly, stopping at a precise distance before rendering a formal salute. "Colonel Matthew Rourke, sir," he announced, his voice carrying across the now silent park. "Lieutenant Colonel Evan Morris, Marine Special Operations Command. Permission to escort you home, sir." The parkgoers who hadn't fled the helicopter's arrival stared in disbelief. Claire and Sophie stood frozen beside their blanket, watching the scene unfold. Rourke's transformation was subtle, but profound. His shoulders squared, his chin lifted, his eyes previously so distant, now focused with sharp clarity. "I assumed no one was still looking," Rourke said, his voice stronger than when he'd spoken to Claire. 10 years, Sir Morris replied. "We never stopped." From the helicopter emerged another figure, an older man with a pronounced limp, wearing civilian clothes but moving with unmistakable military bearing. As he approached Rourke, his composure broke. "Matthew," he said, emotion cracking his voice, "we thought we'd lost you for good." "General Lawson," Rourke acknowledged, his own voice unsteady. "I'm not here as your superior," Ryder corrected. "I'm here as the father of Captain Jeremy Lawson, the last man you saved before the extraction failed." Understanding dawned on Claire's face. The mysterious man with whom they'd shared lunch wasn't just any veteran. He was someone significant, someone who had disappeared from a world that had never stopped searching for him. 2 soldiers approached Claire and Sophie. "Ma'am," one addressed her respectfully, "your kindness today accomplished what military intelligence couldn't manage in a decade." "I didn't do anything special," Claire protested, "just shared a meal." "You saw him," the soldier corrected. "Really saw him when the rest of the world was looking past him. That matters more than you know." Lieutenant Colonel Morris explained quietly that Rourke had disappeared after a classified operation, where difficult field decisions had saved some lives while others were lost. Though officially cleared of any wrongdoing, Rourke had been unable to forgive himself. He disappeared into anonymity, his survival known only to a select few who had spent years tracking fragmented sightings across dozens of states. The mission details remain classified, Morris told her. But what I can tell you is that 8 families have spent 10 years not knowing the full truth of their loved one's final moments. Colonel Rourke is the only one who can provide that closure. As Rourke prepared to board the helicopter, he turned back to Claire and Sophie. Thank you, he said simply, the words carrying the weight of a decade's silence. Claire nodded, understanding that sometimes the greatest gift is treating someone as the person they are, not the ghost they've become. As the helicopter lifted off, a small crowd of remaining parkgoers watched in stunned silence. The woman who had earlier criticized Claire approached hesitantly. I'm sorry for what I said, she admitted. I thought I assumed. We all make assumptions, Claire replied graciously. It's seeing beyond them that matters. News of the dramatic park extraction spread quickly through the town. Reporters contacted Claire for interviews, but she declined them all. This isn't my story to tell, she explained. I just happened to be there when someone needed a friend. Within days, the military held a private ceremony at Quantico. Families of the Lost Task Force ECHO members were finally given the complete account of their loved one's heroism. Rourke, though still struggling with his past, had begun the long journey back to himself. A week later, Claire received a formal letter from the Marine Corps, thanking her for exemplifying the values of compassion and humanity that represent the highest ideals of our nation. Enclosed was a personal note from General Lawson. You reminded a broken warrior that he was still worthy of basic human kindness. In doing so, you helped bring peace to 8 grieving families. Have you ever made the right choice when everyone else walked away? Your story matters too. They found something new waiting at their usual spot. A freshly installed bench with a small bronze plaque, the kindness bench, where a mother taught her daughter the right thing to do. No military helicopters circled overhead that day. No dramatic scenes unfold, but near their picnic spot, a new American flag had been erected, fluttering gently in the spring breeze. As they unpacked their lunch, a courier approached with an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Colonel Rourke. For 10 years, no one truly saw me. I became invisible by convinced I deserved nothing better. Then on an ordinary Sunday, someone offered not just food, but dignity, the simple acknowledgement that I remain human despite everything. Sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures, but from an extra sandwich and a place at the table. You reminded me who I was when I had determined to forget. For that, there is no adequate thanks. The letter was signed simply, a grateful Marine. Enclosed was a small silver charm in the shape of an oak leaf, a reminder of the tree where they'd shared their meal. As Sophie played nearby, Claire noticed how differently people were using the park now. The bench seemed to have become a silent invitation. An elderly woman shared it with a young man clearly struggling with addiction. A businessman in an expensive suit sat beside a woman organizing meager possessions in a shopping cart. Small moments of connection bloomed where barriers had once stood. Claire fastened the charm to Sophie's bracelet that evening. What does it mean, Mommy? The little girl asked. It means, Claire answered, that sometimes the bravest people don't wear uniforms anymore, but they still deserve to be remembered. Some heroes need no introduction or fanfare, and sometimes the simplest action, just an empty seat at a table, can mobilize an entire military and heal wounds hidden for years beneath the surface. Have you ever witnessed a forgotten hero being left behind? Share your story, because your words might be the light someone else needs. Subscribe for more incredible stories where gratitude is never too late to arrive. As Claire folded the letter and glanced toward the bench under the oak tree, her eyes welled up. It wasn't just about the man they had helped. It was about reminding an entire community, maybe even a country, that no kindness is ever wasted. Even the smallest gesture can resurrect someone's sense of worth.